All right. Hey YouTube, I'm Lucky, and in today's video, we're going to be ranking all of the hand cannons. Like I did in the previous video, if you haven't seen it yet, I'm going to be ranking all of the hand cannons currently in Destiny 2 that are not sunset for PvE specifically. And I spent a lot of time doing this. So before we begin this, make sure to smash the like button. I'm doing this video because I asked the last video to get 1,000 likes, and we smashed it. We got 1,300. So maybe by some crazy means we can hit over 1,000 on this video as well. That would be really awesome. I spent a lot of time, I talked with my friends, and we looked at every single role of all of these hand cannons. We did the math, we did all the meme with all the numbers flying around. We did everything. And so now I'm going to bring you the ranking of these hand cannons in Destiny 2. All right? Like last time, I'm going to bring up an example of an S tier hand cannon, and I'm going to give you all of the reasoning explanation as we go through all of this. So first up, we're going to talk about the Volpacula hand cannon. Now this is the a new hand cannon, and it's 180, so it's strengths, right? It's a 180, which is the fastest archetype. You want to shoot really fast in PvE generally. You do better for stunning champions. You do more faster ad clear, things like that. It's consistently better to just fire faster in PvE. The opposite side of the 180s would be the 120s, the slowest RPM, and they tend to just not perform nearly as well or as consistent. And on top of that, so we've got the 180, the best archetype, and then we've got, it's not an exotic, which is nice. That means you could pair some really dope, really strong exotics with it. Like, I don't know, the Telesto, or, I mean, they're about to buff a bunch of exotics, so even the Sleeper would be a crazy thing to pair with this when that update does go through. The role you can get on this, that's going to be the best role, is going to be like explosive payload, and you can get shoot to loot on this. You could also get something like ensemble, might be really good. I personally would choose shoot to loot because it's just a very unique, rare role, and it could be fun to use and have that. And it's just really, really strong, really good champion, stunning weapon, ad clear weapon. It's going to be a solid overall weapon. Probably not the best hand cannon on this list. We'll get to that in a little bit, but definitely an S tier hand cannon if you can get that right roll. Definitely worth your time. Next up on the list, we're going to go to the opposite spectrum. We're going to talk about the Loud Lullaby hand cannon. This is the 120 RPM. It's from the moon. So what I'm going to do, instead of just saying, because it's a 120, it gets the D treatment, it's the worst. I'm going to, look at all the different perks that it can roll on it. It does get that explosive payload perk, which is really nice. It also gets Frenzy on that, which is nice. And even Kill Clip can be an awesome damage boosting perk. To go with that, you've got, Surplus, Subsistence is amazing, and even Slide Shot. So it does have some really good options for PvE rolls on it. So it's probably one of the better 120 RPMs for that reason. And it's legendary, like we talked about, so you can rock an exotic with it. So I'm going to put that actually in the B tier. Even though it is a 120, it'll probably be one of the highest ranking 120s we'll have on this list. Next up, we're going to talk about the Judgment hand cannon. So now we've jumped up to the 140 RPM, and I'm going to put this in A tier. It does have that really, really nice time payload roll, and it does have that demo roll that goes with that really well. So demo time payload, super, super nice. That's probably the absolute best roll for using this thing. You get your grenade energy back, and you stun champions. Honestly, this is borderline, could be S tier, but when I do these charts and do these lists, I like to compare. So Judgment going to be in the exact same slot as the Fatebringer Adept, and unfortunately the Fatebringer Adept just overshadows this weapon so much that I don't know if it would be entirely fair to put them both in S tier. Let me know your thoughts about that in the comment section below. It certainly is very, very good, but I think that the Fatebringer trumps it because it's a 140 as well, and it's a kinetic, so it's kind of hard to put them both in that same category, in my opinion. Next up, we have the Annual Skate hand cannon, one of my favorites to use in PvP. But again, this is a chart for PvE, and this is going to go down into the B tier. Now, the reason why this is going down into the B tier is for a few reasons. There's some better options than this for a solar energy hand cannon, and along with this, the perks that it gets on it, not entirely the best. We do have time payload on this, and we do have like I guess you could use slide shot, surplus, stuff like that. So we're going to put this one actually in the B tier because the rolls aren't nearly as impressive as some others out there. Next up, we're going to bring up the Waking Vigil, and the Waking Vigil is going to be the first to hit the C tier. Again, Waking Vigil has those 150 RPM stats. It was that 150 RPM archetype brought over, and its overall perks for PvE are really not the best. I mean, like the best in slot would be either Kill Clip or Vorpal in its powerful perk slot, and then you'd have to use something like maybe Slide Shot or maybe Outlaw, Rapid Hit in the other. So Waking Vigil, not the best hand cannon, in my opinion. I'm going to put it all the way down in the C tier, especially because, again, like, it's funny to comparing these hand cannons because there's all these other Arc and Solar and Void hand cannons, and so you got to, compare and contrast, would you rather use this arc hand cannon or would you rather use another arc hand cannon? And we'll get to those in just a minute here. Next up, we have the Criminal's Dagger. The Criminal's Dagger, I'm going to put all the way down into the C tier. This is a weapon that is not acquirable anymore. So if you do have a really good roll of this, you know, you're lucky. You have a rare weapon in Destiny. It does get explosive payload. As far as its other perk, really not that impressive. Maybe Outlaw, but really, truly, it's that bad archetype, and the rolls aren't the most impressive for this. So we're going to put it down in the C tier for that. Next up, we've got the Ancient Gospel. All right. Now, the Ancient Gospel is getting that C tier treatment. The reason why is because, again, the perks just aren't that impressive. We've got the Kill Clip, Swashbuckler in the damage boosting slot, or Dragonfly. All really average options for PvE. Ancient Gospel going down in the C tier for this chart. Next up is a bit of a controversial one. Some people might hate me for this one, but we're going over the 7th Seraph Officer Revolver, one of the most powerful hand cannons previously in the game. It would be S tier originally, especially with Warmind cells and Warmind cell builds. However, those have been nerfed pretty substantially. There are some good applications and uses for it, but overall, I do think that this weapon is more of a in-between S and A tier weapon, not just a full-on S tier weapon. It does roll that time payload, which you really like, but in the other slot, it's really, really not that favorable in the other powerful perk slot. So next up, we're going to go over the Posterity, the Arc hand cannon. And yes, the reason why some of those other hand cannons got ranked lower, like the Wake and Vigil, is because the Posterity just outclasses it in so many ways. The Posterity is just so good. It can roll one for all, like probably the most powerful perk for this. You can also get Rampage even if you want to go that route if you're running through strikes, but one for all is like kind of the go-to roll. One for all paired with Reconstruction, you have just a gigantic magazine for free, and then you just mow through ads. I mean, that is a crazy hand cannon right there. That is something definitely worth grinding. The Posterity, easily best arc hand cannon in PvE. If you're running PvE in any capacity, you want to use this Posterity. It's just so good. Just so good. Next up, we're going to be talking about another amazing hand cannon, and that is the Adept Fatebringer, or the Time Lost Fatebringer, rather. And of course, this has to make the list. Of course, this is S tier. This thing is just so good. The stats are amazing. The perks are amazing. It can get explosive payload and frenzy. That's the only hand cannon that can get double damage boosting perks right now. Okay, it used to be the Kindled Orchid back in the day with rapid hit and kill clip. That's sunset now. Now we have the Fatebringer. Bungie pushing the boundaries of that power creep a little bit with this one. Explosive payload frenzy, so good. 2 damage boosting perks on one weapon. I mean, the Fatebringer Adept should honestly be S+ tier. And honestly, it's because of the Fatebringer that I had to rank a lot of these hand cannons significantly lower, because it's easily the best 140 RPM for PvE. There's truly nothing better to use. And it also is absolutely slaps in PvP. So you've really just got it all if you've got a good Fatebringer. You know what I'm saying? You got that time lost one. Next up, we're going to talk about the Dire Promise Kinetic 140 RPM. Now, this bad boy is getting thrown all the way down in the C tier. Unfortunate. Does not have very good perks. Honestly, this could probably even go into the D tier, but it isn't a legendary. And it does have, I mean, I guess Swashbuckler on it and Overflow. Not too bad of a roll. You know, can get a big magazine and maybe you can get Swashbuckler proc. But usually that's not the best for ad clear on these weapons. So we are going to put the Dire Promise down in the C tier for those reasons. Next up, we're going to be talking about the True Prophecy hand cannon. Now, this is that 120 archetype that we don't like nearly as much, so we're putting it down in the C tier. Its perks are also not that impressive, and these 120s, like I said, they just fire so slow. You know, this one has really rough reload right now. You've got Time Payload and Explosive Payload, which are really strong perks in the one powerful slot, and then in the other powerful slot, you have probably your best option is going to be Overflow or Field Prep. Really just not a very impressive hand cannon. Very underwhelming in the current PvE sandbox meta. Next up, we're going to bring up the Iklos hand cannon. A Void 180 archetype. You might think that would be ordinarily really good, but the perks on this are unfortunately just not the best. We've got Vorpal and Rampage in the damage boosting slot. And then in the other slot, we have Subsistence. You've got Triple Tap, Threat Detector. Overall, this thing is just not very good. And that's where we're going to rank this thing all the way down in the C tier for PvE specifically. Next up, we have the Nature of the Beast hand cannon here. All right, this one is going to go into the C tier as well. And honestly, this could go lower simply because it's a 180 and it's a legendary. I allowed it to stay in the C tier, but it has Vorpal as like its best damage boosting perk, and that's, you don't want to be shooting bosses with hand cannons. I mean, we could talk, and I should take a minute to talk about Lucky Pants. Obviously, Lucky Pants can change a variety of these different weapons and stuff, but I think that overall, you still don't want to use these as like boss DPS weapons. I mean, I've melted a few bosses with them, but it was like Morgoth and kind of the easier bosses, you know? If there was a real challenging boss, like for example, when Savathun comes, we're not going to be melting Savathun with Lucky Pants and hand cannons like super efficiently. There might be an efficient strategy to get it done, but it's certainly not going to be like the meta is to rock Lucky Pants and hand cannons to melt raid bosses, in my opinion. So we're going to put this Nature of the Beast down here because of Vorpal, and its reload perks are just atrocious. I mean, it does have subsistence. It's about the best perk you could possibly get on that. Next up, we're going to be talking about the Steady Hand cannon, and oh boy, the Steady Hand Iron Banner hand cannon gets the D treatment. Unfortunately, this thing is just atrocious for PvE. Swashbuckler being its best damage boosting perk on a 120. Really not the way you want to use this. I mean, it's a ranged hand cannon. You'd have to get a melee kill to get the damage boosting perk. And then in the other slot, you've got Outlaw, Slide Shot. Really nothing too impressive. And it's the worst archetype of hand cannons. Next up, we're going to talk about the Igneous Hammer Solar Hand Cannon. Now, the Igneous Hammer is a bit of a tough one to rank because it is that 120 archetype, but it has some kind of crazy good rolls on it. So I'm going to put the Igneous Hammer in B tier simply because it's 120. It could probably go in A tier. It maybe go in between A and B, but I chose to put it in B for the time being. One for All, amazing perk on it. Opening Shot, very good. And then we can go with something like Subsistence, Rapid Hit. It's going to be really good perk options. Overflow as well. I mean, honestly speaking, I'll even, for the sake of this video, I'm going to bring this Igneous Hammer up right here. We'll put the Igneous Hammer up in between A and B. That's going to be like kind of the crown jewel of the 120s, if I'm being completely honest. This is actually very good. The only downside to it is just that slow fire rate and that small magazine that goes with those. But again, Overflow and One for All, you could probably work around that a little bit. Next up, we've got the Palindrome Adept, and you already know where the Palindrome's going to land. The Palindrome is disgustingly good. All right, the Palindrome gets the S tier treatment. Okay, the reason why, you already know. We got Overflow on this bad boy. We got Overflow and One for All. That's just so good. Subsistence One for All is also not half bad. But this thing is just mows down ads. In terms of the Void hand cannon, this is it. This is the Void hand cannon to grind for. So when the Grandmasters are out or when the Nightfall drops this, make sure you get in there and get to grinding this bad boy. Is definitely worth it. Next up, we're going to talk about another Void hand cannon that unfortunately gets trumped very hard because of the Palindrome. And that's the bottom dollar. It does have some really good perks that can get on it though, so I will put it in the B tier category because with the right roll, this would still be a good weapon. And Zur did bring one that was pretty good a little while ago. You can roll Opening Shot on it. You can roll Explosive Payload on it. I meant to say Explosive Payload, not Opening Shot. Explosive Payload, pretty impressive. Subsistence, Rapid Hit to go with that. Not half bad roll overall, but again, you got that small magazine, and you've got the Pally that just outclasses it as a Void hand cannon, so keep that in mind. Next up, we're going to talk about the Survivor's Epitaph Kinetic 180 RPM hand cannon. All right. Survivor's Epitaph we're going to put on this slot right here. Let me move that over. Got to adjust that. Put that in A tier. Okay, we got the 180 archetype. We got some crazy perks on it. I mean, you got One for All on it. Okay, so it's definitely up there. And you got some decent reload perks. You got, a little bit of Outlaw, a little bit of Subsistence to pair with that One for All. Doesn't have that Overflow, so it's not nearly as strong as some of the others. And, it's a good weapon overall. With the right roll, the Survivor's Epitaph, there's a big perk pool to it, though, so good luck getting the God roll of it, but it definitely is a good weapon for PvE. The Finite Impactor now. All right, so here we are. The Finite Impactor gets the B treatment, largely because it's an Arc 140, and it has to stack up against the Posterity, and it just doesn't hang nearly as strong as the Posterity. It does have some pretty decent damage perk on it, just got One for All, but in the other slot, it has nothing to help reload this weapon or give it a bigger magazine. So One for All is kind of the only thing it has going for it. The reason why it's in B is because of that. And then the next one that actually didn't make it in the list last time, was the Nation of Beasts here. Now this is the Last Wish hand cannon, and this thing's actually beast. It is an arc weapon. It's easily the second best one below posterity. We got explosive payload on this. Outlaw is going to be your best roll with that, and it's nasty. It's actually a pretty good hand cannon, and definitely will destroy in PvE. Now let's get onto the exotics. All right, we've got the Ace of Spades. Okay, the Ace of Spades. If you're going to use up your exotic slot, using it on the Ace in PvE, not the best choice overall. It's not the worst weapon. I mean, it's going to have good range. It's going to clear ads pretty well with those explosive shots. You know, reload well. Good magazine size as well. It's not the worst weapon ever, but again, you have to use your exotic slot on it, so keep that in mind. And I just don't think it stacks up because of that, because of it's an exotic. It is a good weapon though. It kind of hurts to have to rank it so low because there's nothing truly wrong with it other than it's an exotic. And technically comparing it to the other ones that have explosive payload or time payload, stuff like that, it doesn't do nearly as much against like champions or is as impressive as like maybe One for All and like a Grandmaster. So we're going to put the Ace in C tier, although it probably could hang in B tier just fine. Next up, we're going to talk about the Sturm. Sturm has really nothing going for it. I mean, if you do rock Sturm and Drang, you get a pretty nasty damage boosting perk. But I mean, are you really going to roll around in PvE with a Sturm and a Drang? I mean, if you are, like, what are you doing? Like, are you like beating raids like this? You're not beating a Grandmaster with a Sturm and a Drang. I mean, you could, but you're not doing it efficiently. That's for sure. So the Sturm without the Drang, unfortunately, is going to get the D tier treatment, and it's got that no damage boosting perk, bad reload, you name it. Sturm, we can agree it's a D tier weapon. And move on to the next exotic, which is going to be the Crimson. Now, the Crimson doesn't really have anything to like make this such a super special weapon. You got the health regen going for it, and you know, it's an overall okay weapon, but in comparison to some of these crazy weapons like the Fatebringer, the Posterity, the Vulpecula, even the Palindrome, like there's no way you can rank this extremely high, and you have to use your exotic, and using your exotic on the Crimson currently is just not really worth it. It's just not worth it in the current PvE sandbox meta. Next up, we have the Malfeasance. Now, Malfeasance is getting a buff here pretty soon, but currently I'm ranking this for this season right now. The Malfeasance is actually not half bad. I mean, if you're using this against Taken, we've got the 180 archetypes. You got like the better archetype. Those explosions are amazing. It's extremely strong against any Taken target. So if you are fighting Taken, this is easily a good choice. And the only downside to this is you are using your exotic. So that's why we're putting it in the B tier. Unfortunately, it kind of hurts to have to rank all these weapons so low. But, you know, in PvE, generally speaking, ranking hand cannons, your hand cannons are used mostly for ad clear. And if you don't really want to use your exotic on that in the high-end PvE, you tend to use your exotic a little more on your special item weapon, your power weapon, generally speaking. Next up, we've got the last word. Now, the last word with Lucky Pants could probably be much, much higher ranked, but the Lucky Pants aside, the last word is not the type of weapon you bring into PvE. We can all agree if you show up to any encounter with the last word on, people are laughing at you, okay? This is just not that type of weapon. It's getting the D tier treatment, and sadly in PvP, it's actually S tier in the other rankings. So it's funny to see the duality of this weapon and how it has swapped quite a bit. So next up, we have the Lumina. Now, the Lumina has some good things going for it, okay? Its exotic perk is crazy, and the stuff you can do with it, with the damage, with boosting and everything, is actually not half bad. You don't see this used or utilized very often. I would like to see it used more in PvE, but currently you don't see it that much, and it's your exotic, so for good reason you don't see it as much. You could easily replace its damage boosting stuff with, you know, weapons of light or, you know, any other sort of damage, like a well of some sort, right? Those will be comparable, if not better, for boosting your damage for yourself and for your team. And obviously you have to use your exotic and hand cannon. So we'll give it the B tier treatment, but it's not half bad. Moving up to the next one, we have the Hawk Moon. Now the Hawk Moon does have that paracausal charge shot, which is really powerful, but leading up to that is not going to be nearly as powerful, right? It's going to be a pretty average hand cannon. Giving it the B tier treatment is a bit of a stretch if I'm being completely honest, but I'm going to put it there because that paracausal shot is pretty nasty, is pretty strong, and I do like it for that reason. But I can't put it any higher than that because you're rocking your exotic in PvE using a Hawkmoon, and it's just not the best or the most viable. Next up, we have the Sunshot. Now, Sunshot does have some good things going for it. Those explosions are really nice. It can actually be pretty good for ad clear. A little bit on the smaller magazine for this weapon, though. And overall, you know, using your exotic for this is not the best option. Like we've said time and time again, I'm going to say that for all the hand cannons. There's really only one exotic that it is good to use on a hand cannon, and that is going to be the Ariana's Vow up next right now. The Ariana's Vow, amazing. Probably the best anti-barrier weapon right now. Just absolutely shreds anti-barrier shields. Definitely worth using your exotic on a hand cannon. The only one probably in PvE, at least, until some of these others get maybe champion mods added to them. Can you imagine the last word had anti-barrier? Now, that would be kind of cool, right? But currently, Ariana's Vow, the only truly viable PvE exotic to use with a purpose. Unless you're doing low-end stuff, like if you're out there doing strikes and stuff, you know, if there's Taken, you know, you could rock a Malfeasance. There's nothing wrong with that. You're just doing strikes. It's not that serious. You know, you don't need to rock like hardcore, heavy meta build just to run through some strikes. So keep that in mind. When I do make these charts, I try to focus them entirely on like high-end PvE, like raids and Grandmasters and stuff like that, because that's kind of the content that matters. You know, you could run around with anything in a strike. You could use a blue sidearm for all you care. And then the last exotic we're going to talk about is going to be the Thorn. And the Thorn is actually not that bad in terms of its damage boosting perk. You can get that to proc consistently, and it's an overall not half bad add clear weapon. But again, using your exotic on a hand cannon, not going to be the most viable, and so we're going to have to give it the B tier treatment, especially when we're comparing this to all the other hand cannons that we ranked in the A tier and S tier for this chart. Now that's it for all the non-sunset hand cannons currently in Destiny 2. Let me know your thoughts about this in the comment section below. If you agree or disagree, or if you think I misrepresented or disrespected any of these weapons, feel free to let me know down below. I will happily do a follow-up video if I did, but I tried to spend a lot of time and make sure I got this chart as right and as accurate to the current PvE sandbox and PvE meta currently in Destiny 2. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, make sure to subscribe with notifications on and smash the like button. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Later.